This is the Justicefighter Podcast. Justicefighter Podcast. With attorney Gerald Griggs. Attorney G. Where we have conversations on social justice, civil rights, and political news that affects us all. Let attorney Griggs put you on game. Only on the Justicefighter Podcast, y'all.
What's going on, y'all? It's attorney Gerald Griggs, the Justicefighter, here on Justicefighter Podcast on the Justice Media Network. And y'all know I always say this, but I am super excited about this next interview because this powerful brother here is doing some phenomenal work in the Georgia State Capitol. He's an awesome advocate for the people, and he's also a frat brother. So, I mean, he just covers all of his bases. But I want to introduce to everybody Representative Jackson. Is a name that you need to remember because he's always trying to inform the people about what's going on down at the Gold Dome. So I just want to, thoroughly introduce him the right way. This is Representative Jackson. Representative Jackson, man, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Anytime, brother. So you were live a little bit early on Facebook, and you were kind of breaking down what's going on here in the state of Georgia. And for those that don't know or may have been under a rock, the governor has started to reopen the state. And so you were given some background information about why we all feel that this was a mistake. So I want to give you the floor and let you just start from there.
Well, first off, I appreciate being on your show, man. I appreciate all the work that you're doing as well, speaking truth to power. But for those who do not know me, I am Derrick Jackson, and I represent District 64. And so just to reset, as my good friend Attorney Griggs has mentioned, if you think about the timeline, and I'm just talking about the state of Georgia, that we started to really engage the coronavirus, it was late March. And so just like all the other states, we started late, right? I mean, I recall back in December of 2019 about China dealing with the coronavirus, but be that what it may. And so in the state of Georgia, we started tackling the coronavirus late March 30th, beginning April timeframe. And so the governor rolled out a series of executive orders. And so here we are now. We have yet to see if any of those executive orders, and some of them were mildly enforced. What I mean by that is we don't even have the resources to monitor all the guidelines that the governor put forward. So like shelter in place or stay at home, we still had a lot of citizens, leaving their homes, not wearing masks and things of that nature. And so as of recent as yesterday, the governor announced, and unbeknownst to all of his staff, did not know he was going to roll this out. But he decided to open up Georgia this coming Friday to hair salons, beauty salons, gyms, bowling alleys, etc. And if you look at the map, those are predominantly in black and brown communities. And that is appalling because all the major corporations are not opening their doors. The Fortune 500 companies not opening up their doors. And so if the major corporations not opening up their doors, but yet we're opening up Georgia to a very small population of folks, you have to ask yourself the question, why? And so I just laid out, as Attorney Griggs mentioned, if you're going to do this, if the governor think that he needs to do this, first he needs to come within accordance with the White House guidelines. But more importantly, I think there's three necessary things that need to be in place. And not just for Georgia, but for anywhere in the nation. You have to have contact tracing. Why is that important? Because for those who are infected, we need to be able to retrace, basically do the forensics where they were, so that way we can inform other citizens that possibly they need to go get tested because they were in the same place at the same time of someone that has been identified as with the coronavirus.
And
testing kit.
Before we go on, because you said something that was real important, and I want people to hear that again. Did you say that the governor rolled out this plan to reopen Georgia without consulting his staff?
Yes, that is exactly right.
Wow.
So some of his staff, main key staffers, and the committee, his task force that's dealing with the coronavirus did not know the governor was going to roll this out to open up Georgia for business. That's correct.
Wow. Okay, go on. You said it was two other items that they need to do before they open up. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that one. No. I'm glad you gave me the opportunity to highlight that, because the other piece, and I think we really need to look at, any person of leadership capacity should do more listening than speaking. And the reason why I suggest that is because you surround yourself with subject matter experts. And so let's say, for example, I'm not a lawyer, but you are, and you give me some advice on some legislation to consider, then I should at least, at a minimum, listen to your point of view, because you have a legal mind. You're trained to think in a legal way. And so someone, as much as experience I may have, I'm not a lawyer. So I would like to think that any leader should consult their committee of folks that they got together in their task force. And that has not been the case. In the last 24 hours, we discovered that the governor rolled this out, and not everyone on his team knew that he was going to open up Georgia for business. Wow.
But number two is the testing kit. We've also discovered in the last 72 hours, Attorney Griggs, that not all testing kits are created equal, because the coronavirus, because it's a virus that has a different kind of strand, and if you misdiagnose this particular individual with a test kit that is not capable of looking at the coronavirus, you just misdiagnose that citizen. And that misdiagnose could very well be fatal. And we don't have the process in place to deal with the kind of capacity that we're seeing. I mean, look at the number of cases in the United States, and more importantly, look at the number of cases in Georgia. And so if we don't have the testing kit available to manage a process with the kind of capacity that we need based on the number of cases, and I'm not even talking about the number of deaths, I'm talking about the number of bona fide, verified cases, then that is also setting up our citizens. And quite frankly, I refer to that as malpractice. We all, for those of us who are elected officials, we took an oath to keep our citizens safe. And so I just think it would be a malpractice for us to not have the right kind of resources available to be able to do the things that we need in this pandemic. And then last but not least is PPE. And as you alluded to in the opening of your show, the PPE is essential for our doctors, our nurses, our law enforcement, firefighters, even the cashier at the grocery store. And simply putting on a bandana, right, is a placebo. This virus, it has the ability to penetrate certain cloths, and it can live on certain cloths. And so if you don't have the right kind of mask, and the right kind of mask is the N95 mask, which there's a huge demand. I mean, we're in battle with all the other states who are looking for the same kind of mask. And so I understand that a lot of folks are manufacturing masks with different kinds of cloths and making them look, nice and fancy and decorative. But if it's not designed to save your life, it's simply a placebo.
Wow. And so that's why I'm appreciative of you and other elected officials who are now speaking truth to power, because, many of us have been saying this for weeks, that there's something amiss going on with the governor and his plans. But to hear it plainly put that way for some things that I knew and some things that I did not know, I'm appreciative of you, brother, for, having the courage and the gumption to speak directly to the people, because the people need to know what's happening in the people's house. So, kind of following up on that line, we've been getting the numbers from the Department of Public Health, and are those the same numbers that the governor is relying on to say we're ready to open for business?
Yes, those are the same numbers. And so the Georgia Department of Health are providing both the governor and the legislative branch the same data. And that's why at least I am, and a lot of my colleagues are bewildered that if the governor is looking at the same data, and that's what we're told, that the Georgia Department of Health is giving the governor the same data that we're looking at, and we're still seeing an uptick. And so if we see an increase in deaths and number of cases, and he's opening up Georgia, and so that's why we're just, in the last 24 hours, we've been issuing official letters. We've been calling, and I would love to ask your audience to call the governor's office as well, 404-656-1776, and tell the governor that this is the wrong move. He's rolling the dice on Georgian lives, and at what cost. This is the wrong move to prematurely open Georgia. If you look at the same data set that you post on a daily basis, we clearly see that we have yet to reach the apex.
So I've seen his task force, many members of them go public today and yesterday saying that they were not consulted. And now we know members of his senior staff were not consulted. Do you know of any of the senior lawmakers that were consulted? I saw that Jeff Duncan was with him, the lieutenant governor, and Speaker of the House Ralston. But outside of those two, was anybody else consulted with the fact that he was going to reopen some jobs on Friday and then a majority of the state on Monday?
Right. So based on what we're talking about are the only ones that we've been informed, Lieutenant Governor and the Speaker, and we thought maybe his staff and all the task force, but we later learned that they did not know. And here's the other sad part to this. We, as the legislative branch, we're not open.
I know.
So that should tell the 10.8 million Georgians in this particular case, if we're not open for business in terms of, so we still have suspended our legislative session. So if we're not open for business, if the governor's mansion is not open for tours, then this is one of those cases where the leader says something but doing something contrary to what they're saying.
Yeah. And so what would be your advice for the people? Because I know I'm getting calls and I'm getting DMs about, what's legal and what's not legal. And I would interject in there that the judicial branch is pretty much closed because we are in a judicial status of emergency until May the 13th. So there are only essential hearings, which are mainly criminal first appearances and bond hearings and some emergency domestic relations hearings, but that's about it. So if the legislative branch and the judicial branch are pretty much closed for business and the governor is consulting with basically two other people, what is your advice for the people who are now being placed in harm's way?
That's a great question. I would suggest these three things because I do not want any of your audience or my constituents or any citizen Don't do as they did the other day in Pennsylvania. Don't show up with no signs and nothing like that. Stay at home. I want to be absolutely clear, Attorney Griggs. Stay at home. But what you can do is, number one, call the governor's office. I'm talking about if it's busy, leave a message and keep calling and ask your neighbors, your friends, your family members. Keep calling 404-656-1776. That's one. Number two, email all of us. I'm talking about there's 236 of us, 180 in the House, 56 in the Senate, and the governor too. Email us every time you have a thought. Email us. That's all public knowledge. You can go right on house.ga.gov and senate.ga.gov, and of course the governor's website, and just email us. That's the second thing you can do. And you don't have to write no dissertation, no long sentences. Just say you're opening Georgia prematurely. You do not agree. Period. End of story. And then the third and the most important thing is this, as I shared with my constituents today. When you vote, absentee ballot or in person, what have you, there are term limits. And that term limit is we can make this president a one term. It's been done before. And we can make this governor a one term. All you got to do is vote. You got to exercise your right, because in the grand scheme of things, that's what this is all about. I really do believe if you're not alive, you can't vote.
And so I'm just
going. We know that 2018, what took place in 2018 here in Georgia, this is a different kind of approach here.
Definitely. And I'm just going to add one more thing. I agree 100% with everything you said, but I'm going to add one more thing. We're not going to do like the individuals in Pennsylvania or Michigan who got up maybe 20 or 30 people and went down to the state capitol. Because when I go to the state capitol, I don't go with 20 or 30 people. I usually go with thousands. But we can do it a little bit more profound digitally. So also in calling and emailing, the governor has several social media sites that you can tag and that you can post and that you can interact with. I would suggest you interact with his social media sites as well, because we know he monitors those. And I would also tell you to go to his website, which is gov.georgia.gov, and email him directly. Because if he wants to come on television and on live stream and dictate to Georgians to either put their families in harm's way or lose their jobs, we got a real problem with that, especially when you're not relying on the data. So, that's just coming from me. That's coming from Attorney Griggs. It's not coming from anybody else. I would say digitally make him understand that there are 10.8 million reasons that this state is not ready to open. So Derrick, is there anything else that the people need to know? I know that live was impactful. It had a lot of information. I want to make sure that we move that on multiple platforms so many people can hear it. Is there anything else that you want the people to know that we can get out on the Justicefighter podcast?
Yeah, and again, I really appreciate you using all the platforms that you have available to get this word out. Folks can follow me. That's vote the number 4_Jackson, or you can find me on Facebook. That's Derrick. That's DERRICK Jackson. But more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, this is about lives, right? This is not about Republican, Democrat, Independent. This is about lives. We have loved ones that's leaving this world alone. We have protocol in place right now because of this pandemic where you can't even go to their funeral. We've closed schools and churches. So that shows you the gravity of this. And so if you do not find that this is enough for you to act and do the things that Attorney Griggs has always been advocating and championing for many, many years, and what we're talking about right now, then I don't know what will. Your life is at stake. And no governor and no president should be rolling the die to find out if your life is valuable or not, and at what cost. And this is when they completely are not even abiding by their own guidelines, right? They're not abiding by their own guidelines, and they're willing to roll the die with your life in the balance. And so we got to do it and exercise our right, our First Amendment right. We got to vote. We got to be on these media platforms, as Attorney Griggs just mentioned, and let our voice be heard. Because if you don't do it now, then when would you do it? This is very important to me, and that's the reason why, I'm going to continue to lend my voice to this conversation. And it's always great to be in partnership with Attorney Griggs and others who are getting this word out, because when your loved one transitions from this world, the only thing we have left are those memories. And no one should die because of the mere fact that someone is willing to roll the die and open up clearly when we're not ready. Atlanta is a global hub. That's my final point. Atlanta is a global hub. Just through the Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, we have over 114 million visitors that come through our airport. Just our airport. It's the world's busiest airport. We are a global hub. And so as long as other countries are still having this pandemic that they're battling, we are always at risk. And the last thing we need is to be dealing with the side of someone thinking that we're open for business and leaving our defenses down and leaving our citizens in harm's way. We're not at war. This is a pandemic. It's a national health crisis, and we need to treat it as such.
Well, I thank you for telling the people that and putting it in such eloquent terms. And what I would just leave everybody with is this. We've marched for less. We've protested for less. This is the defining moment of our generation in this state. And I know a lot of people are saying that this is partisan. This has nothing to do with Democrat or Republican. This has to do with saving lives. People are having funerals digitally. They are running out of bed space in the hospitals. And this virus is still ravaging Georgia. And so we are lending our voices to give you the information. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe Representative Jackson. You can go look at the data for yourself. He just said that the same data that the governor's looking at is on the Department of Public Health's website, dph.georgia.gov website. You can look at it right now. And at 7 o'clock, it'll be a new batch and it'll go up again. And there have been over 700 Georgians that have died, 3,400 hospitalized, and over, is it 18,000 now? 18,000 cases.
That's right.
Of the 78,000 that they've tested. If those numbers don't make you say, wait, there's a problem. Let me put it in perspective. There have been 400,090 cases that the CDC has reported. There are more than 700, almost 800,000 that everybody else is reporting. Okay, that's cases in America. If all of those cases were to pass, and they haven't yet, but if they were to pass, there'll be more people than what died in the Civil War.
That's right.
So we are talking in numbers the same way we would be talking about the Civil War. We don't shortchange that. In New York, there have been more people to die from this virus than died in September 11th. So when we talk about a global pandemic, we talk about a generational event. It's COVID-19. And so what are you going to do in this moment? Because 50 years from now or 100 years from now, when your grandkids or your great-great-grandkids said, Grandma, Granddad, what did you do during the coronavirus? Because right now, we're not talking about a regular flu outbreak. I've seen people on social media, oh, it's a regular flu outbreak. Nah, this thing is like the Spanish flu. And the Spanish flu lasted for 2 years. Atlanta was shut down for 2 months during the Spanish flu. Go back and Google it. And so I appreciate.
Attorney Griggs, I'm glad you mentioned the Spanish flu.
Yeah.
Here's the reason why I'm glad you mentioned that 1918 Spanish flu. The first wave was mild in comparison to the second wave.
Yeah.
Mild. The first wave was mild in comparison. We're talking about over 25 million deaths from 1918 Spanish flu pandemic.
Yeah.
25 million. The second wave that we're not even discussing in the United States right now, and we're certainly not even discussing it in Georgia. There's going to be a second wave. The epidemiologists, they're telling us, they're saying there's going to be a second wave, and we're not even preparing for it.
No, we're not. And so that's why I applaud you and others who've had the courage to tell the people the truth. Because one thing I've learned about the people is if you inform them of the truth, they can prepare and they are resilient. The only reason that the curve even started to slightly, flatten a little bit was that people were warning other people. But what we're doing here in Georgia is extremely dangerous. And so I'm going to continue to have the platform open for you, my brother. Anytime you want to come on any of my platforms to talk about whatever you want to get to the people, it's always open. And I appreciate you for being open and honest. Tell the people how they can follow you one more time, and then we're going to close it out.
Again, thank you for having me on. And again, continue to advocate and championing the work that you've been doing. It's really making a difference. And folks can follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Vote the number 4 _Jackson. And then on Facebook, it's Derrick, DERRICK Jackson. It's real easy. I represent District 64. And I am one that responds to the DM. Just give me, 24 hours, I will respond because we're really trying to get the word out. So, again, Attorney Griggs, keep doing the work that you're doing. It's making a difference in our society and in our nation. And we just need to have more champions out there doing this.
Well, I appreciate you. And let me correct the number. As CNN is now reporting, it's 814,587 cases in the United States and 43,000 deaths.
Wow.
Just take that in, people. We're almost to 1 million. We're 200,000 away from 1 million cases. Let's be in this together. Let's join in the fight. Let's get this information out. Please share on all social platforms. This podcast here on Justicefighter Podcast on the Justice Media Network, and I will see you at the next pod.
This is the Justicefighter Podcast. Justicefighter Podcast with attorney Gerald Griggs. Attorney G. Where we have conversations on social justice, civil rights, and political news that affects us all. Let attorney Griggs put you on game. Only on the Justicefighter Podcast, y'all.